Marcus Hartwell froze when he saw her nameplate on the door. Keisha Williams, Chief Executive Officer. It was impossible. The woman he'd had arrested for stealing $50,000 10 years ago couldn't possibly be sitting in his former office. But there she was, smiling at him from behind his old desk. "Hello, Marcus," Keisha said calmly, not bothering to stand as he entered what had once been his corner office on the 45th floor of Hartwell Industries. "Please, have a seat. We have a lot to discuss." Marcus stood frozen in the doorway, his expensive suit suddenly feeling too tight. The office looked exactly the same. His imported mahogany desk, the crystal awards, the panoramic view of downtown Chicago that had made him feel like master of the universe for 15 years. But everything was fundamentally different. The woman sitting behind his desk, wearing an impeccable navy blazer and pearl earrings, was supposed to be destroyed, broken, working some minimum wage job after he'd made sure she was blacklisted from every respectable company in America. "This has to be some kind of sick joke," Marcus said, his voice cracking. "Security! Security!" Keisha pressed the intercom button with one manicured finger. "James, could you please explain to Mr. Hartwell that you work for me now?" The familiar voice of James Morrison, his former head of security, crackled through the speaker. "Yes, Ms. Williams. Mr. Hartwell, please remain calm. Ms. Williams is the new owner and CEO of this company as of 9 a.m. this morning." Marcus felt his legs give way and collapsed into the leather chair across from his former desk. "That's impossible. This company is worth $800 million. You were just a secretary, a thief. I had you arrested." "You had me arrested for something I didn't do," Keisha corrected, her voice steady as steel. "Remember? $50,000 that went missing from the client entertainment fund. Money that security footage later proved you took yourself to cover your gambling debts." The memory hit Marcus like a physical blow. 10 years ago, Keisha Williams had been his executive assistant, brilliant, dedicated, Harvard MBA graduate. She had discovered discrepancies in several accounts, money that Marcus had been quietly stealing to fund his growing gambling addiction and maintain his lavish lifestyle. When Keisha brought the irregularities to his attention, expecting him to investigate and fix the problem, Marcus had panicked. Instead of coming clean, he had made a decision that would haunt him forever. He framed her for embezzlement, planted evidence in her desk, and used his connections to have her arrested on felony charges. "The charges were dropped," Marcus said weakly. "The security footage cleared you." "After I spent 6 months in Cook County Jail waiting for trial," Keisha replied with frightening calm. "After I lost my apartment, my savings, and any chance of getting another corporate job. After you made sure every company in 3 states knew I was a suspected embezzler who couldn't be trusted." Marcus watched as Keisha opened a thick file folder on the desk. Inside were newspaper clippings, legal documents, and photographs that made his stomach turn. "I kept very careful track of you over the years, Marcus. Your gambling debts at 4 different casinos, your tax evasion schemes, your illegal campaign contributions. Did you know that 3 other employees were fired under suspicious circumstances after I left? All minorities who had discovered your creative accounting practices." "How did you?" Marcus began, then stopped. He was starting to understand that this wasn't coincidence. This was a carefully orchestrated plan that had taken years to execute. "How did I go from a jail cell to the CEO's chair?" Keisha smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "It's quite a story. Would you like to hear it?" Without waiting for an answer, Keisha leaned back and began to recount a tale that would have impressed the most ruthless Wall Street sharks. "After the charges were dropped, I discovered I was completely unemployable in corporate America. No company would hire someone who had been publicly accused of embezzlement, even though I was innocent. Your smear campaign had been too effective." Marcus winced. The idea of his former assistant, with her MBA from Harvard, being reduced to unemployment because of his lies was disturbing. "So I did what any desperate single mother would do. I took the only job I could find. I started cleaning office buildings at night for minimum wage, scrubbing toilets and emptying trash cans in the same corporate towers where I had once commanded respect and a 6-figure salary." Keisha stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago. But cleaning buildings at night gave me access to something incredibly valuable: information. Do you know how much sensitive business information corporate executives discuss when they think the cleaning lady is invisible? She turned back to Marcus, who was staring at her with growing comprehension of how thoroughly he had underestimated the woman whose life he had tried to destroy. I learned about upcoming mergers before public announcements, real estate deals that would transform neighborhoods, stock transactions that would move markets, patent applications that would revolutionize industries, all while emptying trash cans and being treated like I was completely invisible. Marcus felt a chill as he began to understand the scope of what Keisha was describing. Industrial espionage on a massive scale, conducted by a woman corporate executives, had dismissed as beneath notice. I started small. A few $100s invested based on information I overheard during late-night board meetings. Then, thousands when I learned about pharmaceutical approvals. Within 18 months, I had enough capital for serious investments. Keisha returned to her seat, her movements confident and controlled like a chess master who had been planning victory for years. Remember the Millennium Tower project on Lakeshore Drive? The one where developers went bankrupt and the property was auctioned for 20 cents on the dollar? Marcus nodded. Millennium Tower had been one of Chicago's biggest real estate disasters, until it became one of the most profitable developments when luxury condos sold for astronomical prices. I bought that property through a shell company. I knew from cleaning architectural offices that the structural problems were minor and fixable. I also knew from cleaning city planning that zoning restrictions would change to allow mixed-use development, information that cost me nothing but time and observation. Marcus was beginning to feel sick. The anonymous developer who made $200 million on Millennium Tower, that was you. That was my first major success, but far from my last. Over 8 years, I built Williams Capital Management into one of the most successful investment firms in the Midwest. We specialize in distressed assets, hostile takeovers, and turning around failing companies. Marcus's face turned ashen. Williams Capital Management was legendary, known for aggressive acquisitions that always proved profitable, for having information that gave them insurmountable advantages. You're telling me Williams Capital, worth over $500 million, is yours? Correct. And 6 months ago, when your company started experiencing serious financial difficulties due to gambling debts and mismanagement, Williams Capital was positioned to offer a solution, a complete buyout at what your board considered a generous price. Marcus felt his world crumbling. The anonymous buyer, the shell company, that was all you? LLCs are wonderful instruments, Keisha said, savoring his horror. They allow you to acquire companies without revealing identity until paperwork is signed. Your board was enthusiastic about our cash offer. They were tired of covering for your mistakes. This is impossible, Marcus said, but he knew it wasn't. He had seen the acquisition papers that morning, been told to clear his office by noon. He had assumed it was some faceless conglomerate, not the woman whose life he had destroyed. Keisha opened another folder and spread documents across the desk. These are copies of every financial transaction you've made in 5 years, Marcus. Every gambling debt, every questionable loan, every attempt to manipulate company funds. I've been building a case against you for years. Marcus stared at evidence of his crimes laid out like pieces of a devastating puzzle. What do you want? Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Revenge? You want to humiliate me like I humiliated you? Have me arrested? Keisha studied him for a long moment. Do you know what the worst part was, Marcus? Not the 6 months in jail, though being surrounded by violent criminals wasn't pleasant. Not losing my apartment or watching my savings drain away. She paused, letting silence stretch between them. The worst part was watching my 7-year-old daughter, Jasmine, ask why Mommy couldn't afford new school clothes. Why we had to move in with Grandma. Why kids at school said her mother was a criminal. Marcus blinked, remembering vaguely that Keisha had had a young daughter who occasionally visited the office, a bright, polite little girl. Jasmine was 7 when you had me arrested, Keisha continued, her voice hardening. She's 17 now, just accepted to Harvard with full scholarship. She wants to study corporate law, specializing in white-collar crime. I wonder where she got that inspiration. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. His actions had created not just his nemesis, but inspired the next generation to fight exactly his kind of corruption. "So what happens now?" Marcus asked, dreading the answer. "You have me arrested? Destroy my life like I tried to destroy yours?" Keisha leaned back in the executive chair and appeared to consider carefully. "Actually, I have a better idea," she said finally. "You're going to stay and work for me, as my personal assistant." Marcus let out a bitter laugh. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. Same responsibilities you gave me. Filing, scheduling, making coffee, taking notes. The only difference is now I make the strategic decisions." "I won't do it," Marcus said, standing. "I'll quit. Find another job." "With what references?" Keisha asked mildly. "I own this company now, Marcus, and I have documented evidence of your crimes spanning a decade. Tax evasion, embezzlement, fraud, money laundering, enough to send you to federal prison for 20 years. Marcus sank back down, realizing his impossible position. "You're blackmailing me." "I'm offering employment, the same position you gave me before deciding to destroy my life. Think of it as education, learning what it feels like on the other side of the power dynamic." Over the next hour, Keisha outlined Marcus's employment terms. He would report at 8 a.m. sharp, handle correspondence, schedule appointments, perform whatever tasks she deemed necessary. His salary would be $45,000, exactly what he'd paid her 10 years ago, no adjustment for inflation. "There's one additional requirement," Keisha said as Marcus prepared to leave. "Tomorrow at 10 a.m. you're holding a press conference. You're going to publicly admit what you did to me." "Absolutely not," Marcus said, his voice rising. "That would destroy what's left of my reputation." "Your reputation was destroyed when you framed an innocent woman," Keisha replied icily. "The press conference isn't a request, Marcus. It's a condition of employment. Confess publicly and keep your job, or stay silent and face criminal prosecution." Marcus realized he was completely trapped. Keisha had spent 10 years building an airtight case while constructing her empire. She held all the cards. The next morning, Marcus stood behind the podium in the same conference room where he'd once announced Keisha's arrest. The assembled reporters and camera crews created an atmosphere of barely contained anticipation. "10 years ago, I made a terrible mistake," Marcus began, his voice shaking as cameras flashed. "I falsely accused my executive assistant, Keisha Williams, of embezzling $50,000. The truth is, I was the one who stole that money." The room erupted in questions, but Marcus continued reading Keisha's prepared statement. "I took the money to cover gambling debts. When Ms. Williams discovered the discrepancies and brought them to my attention, I panicked. Instead of accepting responsibility, I chose to frame an innocent woman for my crimes." Marcus paused, hands trembling as he turned the page. In the back, he could see Keisha standing near the door, her presence a constant reminder of the justice he'd tried to deny. "I planted fabricated evidence in Ms. Williams's desk and used personal connections to have her arrested on felony charges. She spent 6 months in jail for a crime she didn't commit. She lost her apartment, savings, and reputation because of my lies." The questions became more insistent, but Marcus pressed on. "Even after security footage proved Ms. Williams's innocence and charges were dropped, I used my influence to blacklist her from employment at every major corporation in the region. I destroyed her career and family's financial security to protect myself from consequences of my criminal behavior." When Marcus finished, he looked up at dozens of cameras and furious journalists. The story would be front-page news everywhere. "I am here to publicly apologize to Ms. Williams and announce that she is now owner and CEO of Hartwell Industries," Marcus concluded. "She has demonstrated more integrity and business acumen than I ever possessed. I can only hope to someday earn a fraction of the forgiveness she's shown by allowing me to continue working for the company I once ran into the ground." The story made national headlines within hours. From jail cell to CEO. How one woman turned false accusations into business empire. Keisha was featured on Forbes, Fortune, and Businessweek covers. She was invited to speak at Harvard Business School, Wharton, and other prestigious institutions about resilience and ethical leadership. Television interviews poured in from every major network. Publishers offered seven-figure advances for her autobiography. Documentary filmmakers wanted to tell her triumph story. But perhaps the most satisfying moment came 6 months later, when Keisha walked past Marcus's modest desk in the outer office. He was filing quarterly reports, wearing off-the-rack suits instead of designer clothing, his expensive watch replaced by a basic timepiece. When Marcus looked up, Keisha saw something unexpected in his eyes, genuine respect mixed with hard-earned humility. "Ms. Williams," he said quietly, standing as she approached, "your 2 p.m. appointment with Goldman Sachs has arrived. They're waiting in conference room A." "Thank you, Marcus," she replied professionally. "And Marcus? That analysis you prepared of the Morrison Industries acquisition was exceptionally thorough. You're developing real skills." It was small acknowledgement, but it represented something larger. Marcus was learning what it meant to work for someone else, to follow orders instead of giving them, to rebuild professional reputation from ground up, just as Keisha had been forced to do. He was also learning the value of honest work, satisfaction from completing tasks well, and dignity that could be found in any job performed with integrity. That evening, Keisha sat in her office, truly hers now, looking out at Chicago's glittering lights. On her desk sat a framed photo of daughter Jasmine in Harvard acceptance ceremony cap and gown, and next to it, the building deed proving her complete ownership of everything Marcus had once controlled. She thought about the woman who had cleaned these offices during lonely midnight hours, listening to conversations and planning her comeback. That woman had been broken, but not defeated, humiliated, but not destroyed. Keisha picked up her phone and dialed. "Hi, sweetheart," she said when Jasmine answered. "How was your first week at Harvard Law?" "Incredible, Mom. I met with my advisor about my thesis on corporate accountability. I told her about your story, and she wants to use your case in her securities fraud course. You're going to be famous in legal academia." Keisha laughed warmly. "I'm already famous, baby. But more importantly, you'll make sure what happened to me never happens to anyone else. You'll be the lawyer I couldn't afford when I needed one." After hanging up, Keisha opened her laptop and began working on her next project, the Williams Foundation for Workplace Justice, dedicated to helping wrongfully accused employees fight corporate retaliation. She had resources now to hire the best attorneys, investigators, and advocates. More importantly, she had the platform to make real difference in lives of working people victimized by powerful employers. A soft knock interrupted her planning. Marcus stood in the doorway with contracts requiring her signature, his usual efficiency tempered by something else, perhaps genuine remorse. "The Peterson Industries merger documents are ready," he said, placing papers carefully on her desk. "I've prepared a summary of key terms and risk factors." He paused, gathering courage for what he wanted to say. "Ms. Williams, I wanted to tell you something. I know I can never repay the debt I owe for what I did to your life and family. Saying sorry is inadequate for the suffering I caused, but working for you has taught me things about leadership, integrity, and human decency that I never learned in all my years as CEO." Keisha looked up from the documents, studying the face of the man who had once wielded absolute power over her and chosen to use it destructively. "Marcus," she said finally, her voice softer, "everyone deserves a second chance to become better, even people who don't think they deserve forgiveness. The question isn't whether you deserve redemption, it's whether you're willing to do the work to earn it." After Marcus left, Keisha returned to foundation planning. Tomorrow she would announce the Williams Foundation with $50 million endowment. She would hire skilled employment attorneys, experienced investigators, and effective advocates to help employees fight corruption and retaliation. The foundation would provide legal representation for workers who couldn't afford attorneys. It would fund investigations into corporate wrongdoing, It would lobby for stronger whistleblower protection laws and severe penalties for executives who retaliated against honest employees. Tonight, as Keisha sat 45 floors above Chicago, she marveled at the journey from Cook County jail cell to corporate pinnacle. She thought about Jasmine, now studying law at Harvard with dreams of fighting corporate crime. She thought about Marcus, slowly learning to work with integrity instead of victimizing others. She thought about all the employees who would benefit from her foundation. Most of all, she thought about the 7-year-old girl who once asked why mommy couldn't afford school supplies. That little girl was now a brilliant young woman, becoming one of the country's most effective white-collar crime prosecutors. Marcus Hartwell had tried to destroy Keisha Williams with a lie, but instead created something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing to lose and everything to gain, who transformed pain into power and victimization into victory. The assistant framed for theft now owned the company. The single mother who lost everything now controlled a business empire. The woman dismissed as powerless now held workplace justice's future in her hands. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't getting revenge on those who hurt you. It's succeeding so spectacularly that enemies have no choice but to respect the very person they tried to destroy. Sometimes justice takes years to arrive, but when it comes, it's more complete and satisfying than any quick retaliation. Keisha Williams learned those lessons the hard way, and now she was teaching them to a world desperately needing to understand the difference between power and strength, between revenge and justice, between destroying others and building something lasting to protect future generations from the same betrayal she endured. If this story of resilience, patience, and ultimate triumph touched your heart, remember that every setback can become foundation for even greater comeback. If you're willing to work for it, plan for it, and never give up on the possibility that justice, though sometimes delayed, will eventually prevail. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something so successful and meaningful that they end up learning from the very person they tried to eliminate. Thank you very much for listening. Please let us know what you think of this story in the comments. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any other videos.